Chapter 30: The Crown and the Dream of Ruin. The halls of the palace were steeped in mourning, the weight of the late king's passing evident in every shadow that clung to the stone walls. The banners of House Camber hung unmoved, their golden embroidery reflecting the dim light of the morning torches. Servants and nobles alike walked in silence, their eyes cast downward, yet beneath the grief, whispers of political turmoil slithered through the corridors. Elowen did not slow her pace. Lyra and Selene followed close behind her, silent, their presence reassuring but distant. This was not their battle to fight. At last she reached the throne room. The golden doors were partially open, revealing the tense scene inside. Alastair stood at the foot of the throne, his back straight, his hands clasped behind him. He was garbed in mourning black, but his head was bare, no crown adorned his brow. Around him, nobles murmured in frustration, their voices rising in barely restrained indignation. "The kingdom cannot remain without a ruler, Prince Alastair," a noble's voice rang sharply. "You have halted the coronation ceremony long enough." "There is no crown prince." Alastair's voice was steady, unwavering. "My father did not name a successor before his passing. The throne remains contested." A low murmur spread through the gathered lords and ladies. "And yet you hold all power in your hands," another noble spoke, stepping forward. "You are the eldest. The nobles of the court stand behind you. Why do you hesitate?" Alastair turned sharply, his cold gaze sweeping across the room. "Because I will not allow this kingdom to fall into war over succession." His tone left no room for argument, but it did little to ease the growing unrest. And then Elowen stepped inside. The nobles fell silent as she entered, their eyes shifting to her with unreadable expressions, some wary, some outright hostile. The rift between her and Alastair had always been political. Some saw her as the rightful heir, others as an unwanted remnant of the past queen's bloodline. Alastair's gaze landed on her, and for a moment his expression softened. "You came back." Elowen gave him a slight nod, stepping closer, her dark cloak sweeping across the marble floor. "We need to speak." The nobles hesitated, but Alastair motioned for them to leave. The room slowly emptied, though many cast lingering glances at them before disappearing beyond the doors. When the doors finally closed, a silence settled between them. "A conversation between heirs!" Alastair studied her, his expression unreadable. "You look exhausted," he finally said. Elowen let out a dry breath. "That is an understatement." His eyes flickered to Lyra and Selene, who remained near the entrance, silent. He did not question their presence. Instead, he stepped forward. "Tell me, what has happened?" She hesitated, then began to tell him everything. She spoke of the seer, of the truth of her birth, of the chains of heaven and the monsters stirring in the darkness. She spoke of Sir Aldrich's fate, and of the journey they still had to undertake to Audenham, where the will of law might guide them to their answer. Alastair listened in silence, his expression darkening with every word. When she finished, he exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "And yet, you still came back." She looked at him, unsure of what he meant. He took a step closer, his voice quieter now. "You could have left. You could have gone straight to Audenham and left the kingdom behind. But you didn't. You returned." Elowen frowned. "Because I had to. Sir Aldrich, his family." "No," Alastair interrupted gently. "Not just for him. You came back because you still feel responsible for this place." She said nothing. Alastair took a slow breath, then did something she did not expect. He reached out and took her hands in his. "Marry me." The words struck like lightning. Elowen's breath caught. What? His gaze was unwavering. "Marry me, Elowen. Be my queen. Together we can rule, protect this kingdom from what's coming." For a heartbeat she could only stare at him. Alastair had never been sentimental. His proposal was not one of love. It was one of practicality. He saw what was happening, what was coming, and he was offering her a position of power to face it together. But she knew the truth. She would not rule. She would ruin. Elowen took a slow step back, breaking his hold. "No." Alastair's brows furrowed. "No," she shook her head. "I will not be queen, not until the god is defeated once and for all." His jaw tightened. "You would refuse the throne, your birthright?" She looked at him, her voice quiet but resolute. "I have seen the future, Alastair. I have seen the ruin my crown brings. If I take the throne now, it will be the end of this kingdom." A flicker of something, fear, understanding, crossed his gaze. Eloin turned away before he could argue further. "I will return when this is over, but until then, I cannot be what you need me to be." And with that, she left the throne room, leaving Alastair standing alone in the shadow of the crown. Chapter 30. The Crown and the Dream of Ruin. Continuation. Eloin returned to her estate in silence, her thoughts a storm she could not quell. The weight of Alastair's proposal lingered like a shadow in her chest, but there was no time to dwell on what could have been. The moment they arrived, she turned to Selene. "Summon Sir Aldrich's family. They deserve the truth from us, and they will have every ounce of support I can give." Selene hesitated, her sharp gaze searching Eloin's face, but she nodded and left without a word. Lyra lingered. "This will not be easy." Eloin exhaled, her hands tightening into fists. "It never is." The fallen knight's family. The next day, Aldrich's family arrived, a sombre gathering of mourning nobility. His father, Lord Dorian Aldrich, stood at the forefront, his iron composure unyielding. His mother, Lady Evelyn, barely concealed her grief behind a delicate veil. Marianne, his younger sister, who had once admired her brother's courage, stood pale and silent. Eloin met them in the great hall, dressed in black, her shoulders squared. She spoke plainly, recounting Aldrich's sacrifice, how he had fought to the very end to save her, how he had freed her from the grip of the god's nightmare, and how, even now, his fate remained uncertain. Lady Evelyn clutched her chest, grief overtaking her. Marianne bit back a sob. Lord Dorian stood unmoving, his gaze locked onto Eloin's with steel-like resolve. "His body remains in elven care," Eloin assured them. "They have sworn to do all in their power to bring him back. Until then, I will see to it that your household is supported. Whatever you need, it will be given." Lord Dorian regarded her for a long moment before speaking. "My son believed in you, your highness. If you would honour him, then do not let his sacrifice be in vain." Eloin bowed her head. "I swear it." A call to the mage order. With Aldrich's family cared for, Eloin turned her attention to their next mission. She summoned the Order of Mages, calling upon those who would aid in their journey to Audenham. The great hall of the Mage Tower flickered with blue flame as the arcane scholars assembled. At the centre stood Archmage Vaelric, a stern-faced man draped in deep violet robes. "You seek preparation for another journey, your highness," he mused. "Where do the fates take you now?" "To the south, to Audenham." A murmur rippled through the gathered mages. "The city of law?" Vaelric raised a brow. "Few seek that place willingly. Fewer still return unchanged." Eloin's gaze did not waver. "Then I will be one of the few." Preparations began at once. Spells were gathered, supplies readied. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily upon them all. The king's burial days passed in solemn quiet, and then came the day of the funeral. Beneath a storm-laden sky the kingdom gathered. Incense thickened the air, its scent clinging to grief-heavy breaths. The great cathedral bells tolled, their deep voices rolling across the city. Soldiers stood in disciplined lines, nobles cloaked in black filled the temple halls, and common folk pressed together beyond the palace gates, heads bowed in respect. The late king's body rested upon an ornate stone bier, hands folded over his sword, his crown placed beside him. At his feet lay white lilies, the flower of farewell. Alastair stood at the forefront, clad in mourning attire, his face a mask of unreadable grief. Eloin stood beside him, silent. As the high priest delivered the eulogy, a voice cut through the stillness. "It is a shame," said Lord Castian Vale, his tone sharp as steel, "that the late king, in his final moments, did not call for his own son, but instead for someone who was not even present." Tension thickened the air. Eloin's hands clenched at her sides. Castian Vale, head of the powerful Vale family, was known for his cutting words and dangerous ambitions. A long-time supporter of Alastair, his disdain for Eloin was no secret. "Had the princess been here," Castian continued, his gaze gleaming, "perhaps our king's final wish would not have gone unheard." A murmur spread through the nobles. Some nodded in quiet agreement, while others, those loyal to Alastair, bristled in anger. Before Eloin could respond, Alastair's voice rang out. "That is enough, Lord Castian." His tone was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. "This is neither the time nor the place." Castian inclined his head. "Of course, your highness. My apologies. It was merely an observation." The burial continued, but Elowen felt the weight of many gazes upon her. She had been absent, not by choice but by necessity, yet in the eyes of some she had already failed. As the final rites were spoken and the king's body was lowered into the tomb, Elowen whispered under her breath, "I will not fail again." Above her, the storm rumbled in answer. Chapter 30, The Crown and the Dream of Ruin, continuation. After the funeral, a hushed unease settled over the kingdom. Whispers, accession, and unrest filled the halls of nobility, but Elowen had no time for politics. The road ahead demanded her full attention. To her surprise, the mages had already prepared a way to hasten the journey. She stood in the grand courtyard of the Mage Tower, where arcane circles pulsed with a soft blue glow. Intricate runes, ancient and powerful, lined the stone floor, forming an elaborate web of teleportation. A dozen mages stood in formation, their robes shifting with unseen energy as they chanted in low, melodic tones. Elowen turned to Archmage Veilric, her voice edged with surprise. "You prepared teleportation circles?" The old mage gave her a measured look. "We assumed you would not want to waste time travelling on horseback across the continent," she frowned. "I hadn't anticipated it would be possible. The distance is vast." "It is," Veilric agreed. "But Audenham is one of the great capitals, and within it stands the House of Doors. Anyone who has visited it before can anchor a portal to it, provided they have the skill." Elowen exhaled. The House of Doors, a relic of the past, a marvel of magic and lore, a single building connecting every capital on the continent through an intricate network of portals. She had read about it, but never seen it. "A moment to prepare, then," she said. Lyra and Selene stepped closer, their faces impassive but watchful. Alistair had not come to see them off. Perhaps it was better that way. As the mages completed their preparations, the air within the circle shimmered, like heat rising from sun-baked stone. The world rippled, the very fabric of space folding upon itself. Then, in a flash of silver-blue light, the portal tore open. Beyond the swirling energy, a glimpse of Audenham awaited. Through the House of Doors. Stepping through the portal was both weightless and overwhelming. It felt like walking through silk-spun water, as if time had stretched and collapsed within the same breath. For a moment, all was light and silence. Then they emerged. The House of Doors was unlike anything Elowen had ever seen. An enormous domed hall, vast as a palace, with marble floors engraved with celestial constellations. Towering columns stretched toward a ceiling that shimmered like the night sky, imbued with moving images of the heavens. Hundreds of portals lined the walls, each framed in ornate stonework, pulsing with faint magical energy. Mages in flowing robes walked between them, some guiding travellers, others conducting arcane rituals to stabilize the gates. The scent of parchment, ink, and faintly burning incense filled the air. "Impressive," Lyra murmured, her eyes sweeping across the expanse. Selene, ever the quiet observer, simply nodded. An attendant in deep blue robes approached, bearing the insignia of the Order of Law. "Travellers, welcome to the House of Doors. State your destination." Elowen straightened. "We seek the capital of law, Audenham." The attendant studied them, then gestured toward a set of wide, ornate bronze doors at the far end of the chamber. "Step through, and the city will welcome you." With a final glance between them, they walked forward. As they passed through the gates, the air shifted once more, and the world changed. Audenham, the floating city of law. The first thing that struck Elowen was the scent of salt and sun-warmed metal. Audenham was a city of symmetry and discipline, but unlike any capital she had ever seen. It did not rest upon the land, but floated upon the lower ocean, a vast stretch of sapphire water shimmering beneath the sunlight. Polished white stone paved the streets, but beneath them massive metallic constructs groaned softly, shifting ever so slightly with the rhythm of the tides. Bridges of enchanted steel stretched between great circular platforms, suspending buildings over the water. The entire city was a marvel of arcane engineering, held afloat by laws older than any kingdom. Above, the sky was bright and clear, the sun's reflection off the waves making the city glow with an almost divine radiance. Tall golden towers rose at precise intervals, intricate yet unyielding, monuments to the structured beauty of the goddess of order. At the heart of it all stood the Grand Tribunal, a towering citadel of marble and silver, where the laws of the continent were written and enforced. It loomed above the city like a silent judge, a reminder that Audenham was not just a capital, it was the foundation of law itself. The ground beneath them was steady yet oddly fluid, as if the city itself breathed with the ocean. Every now and then, a faint tremor ran through the stones underfoot, a reminder that they stood upon something unnatural, something sustained by magic older than memory. "It's beautiful," Celine said, though there was something in her voice, a quiet unease. Eowyn understood. Audenham was a place of balance and law, but it was also a place where chaos was erased without mercy. She could feel it in the air, in the way people moved with measured precision, in how no one lingered too long in the wrong place. This was a city that did not forgive mistakes. "Come," she said at last, setting her eyes on the Grand Tribunal. "We have much to learn." And with that, they stepped forward into the heart of the City of Law.